Welcome to another podcast with the UCSB Art, Design, and Architecture Museum. I'm Noelle.
Hi, I'm Brenda.
I am Natalie.
And I am Sihi, and we are interns with the Campus Art Museum.
Like many schools across our country, UCSB has had to make major adjustments due to COVID-19, which have conjured feelings of mass uncertainty and anxiety. Nevertheless, the ambition of UCSB students and our campus persists in its commitment to education and personal support. From virtual yoga classes to dining hall takeout, the tireless efforts of those keeping our institution running are greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, this lockdown has halted the visitation to public spaces and interactive sites. This includes museums having to transition into virtual institutions, from publishing online exhibitions, utilizing Instagram stories to take you through their galleries, and even providing ideas for in-home art projects. Our own campus museum, the AD&A Museum, has also posted their current exhibitions online for viewing, and this podcast is here to engage with one of them, the participatory installation Hostile Terrain 94. Warning. The content discussed in this podcast may be emotionally triggering to some listeners, as personal stories regarding the humanitarian consequences of American migration will be addressed.
Hostile Terrain 94 is a global pop-up exhibit put on by the Los Angeles-based nonprofit organization, the Undocumented Migration Project, founded by Jason De León in 2009. The exhibit aims to confront community members with the often overlooked, harsh realities of undocumented migration at the U.S.-Mexican border by requiring the participation of community members to complete the installation, a 20-foot-long wall map of the Arizona-Mexico border, with over 3,200 toe tags attached. Each toe tag represents a dead body that has been found in the Sonoran Desert between the mid-1990s and 2019, and contains the available and identifiable information of that person. This includes the person's case number, name, age, sex, date the body was located, condition of the body, cause of death, and coordinates where the remains were found, which before the museum's closure in March were written out by the Santa Barbara, Goleta, and UCSB communities. The exhibition's name directly refers to a 1994 border policy implemented by the United States called Prevention Through Deterrence. The policy heightened Border Patrol enforcement at more populated urban ports of entry, which migrants were historically accustomed to crossing. U.S. Border Patrol officials believe this would discourage individuals from illegally crossing through more remote and dangerous natural environments left less attended to, what they deemed the hostile terrain of the Sonoran Desert in southern Arizona. However, this strategy has evidently failed. More than 6 million people have attempted the journey since the year 2000, with at least 3,200 of the crossers dying along the way. UCSB is only one of 150 locations where the exhibit was to open worldwide leading up to the November 2020 U.S. presidential election. During the election year, De León and his team planned to collect toe tags written by the host bases and compile them into an installation in Washington, D.C. The aim of the show is to visually represent and materialize how decisions made in the elected offices of the U.S. government have the capacity to yield mass fatalities, while inviting others to take action.
The artifacts presented in Hostile Terrain 94 create a spatial representation of the research conducted upon undocumented migration. Clear plastic boxes contain a recovered collection of objects used by migrants in their journey. These include a pair of shoes binded by a cord, water bottles specifically designed to avoid the sun's incriminating reflection, and a small Bible that stands as a beacon of hope. Tattered clothing, covered in dirt, litter the adjacent wall in an overwhelming collage of phantom bodies as a television screen plays looped drone footage of the vast Sonoran Desert. 3 headphones allow the visitor to listen to interviews conducted with migrants, to hear their voices tell their own stories. These items construct a narrative mediating the line between telling personal stories through material objects and lying bare the atrocities that have been committed on behalf of the American government. Upon entering the room, the visitor's gaze is immediately drawn to a map that consumes the central wall. The map is a spatial reconstruction of the Sonoran Desert, the hostile terrain vanguarding the Arizona-Mexico border. Acting as a platter prepared for the display of thousands of toe tags, museum guests fill each tag while they encounter the unfortunate scale of a contemporary American tragedy that is ever evolving. Each label is color-coded depending on whether the body has been identified. Unidentified orange tags dominate the names written on the manila ones, highlighting the magnitude of losing thousands of lives and resilient people. The intimate gesture enacted when one sits down to fill out a tag engages them with an individual life, not as a quantified fatality, but as a human being with a name, face, and identity.
Today, we want to provide a platform for our UCSB community to share their personal journey identifying as a migrant, undocumented student, or refugee. We have also encouraged this podcast to be a space for those who resonate with this subject to respond to Hostile Terrain 94 after viewing the online exhibition. Each student has graciously volunteered to voice their story and to be the core of this podcast. The UCSB AD&A Museum and its interns would like to thank these students and the university community for helping make this podcast come to fruition. We hope to stimulate discourse surrounding the contemporary immigration crisis by uniting our students through the power of art. So to begin, here's our first guest, Leticia.
I was born and raised in Brazil and lived there until 2017 when I was accepted into the PhD program in History of Art and Architecture at UCSB. Arriving here was a culture shock in many ways, issues that I contend with to this day. Each country in the world has its own social, behavioral, and communicational protocols, which become even more evident in the formal spaces of academia, and it is no different in the United States. I had to learn from example, by trial and error, and I'm still self-conscious about how I interact with American people. As an international student and citizen, you are also constantly reminded of your foreignness, be it through how people react to you, pointed commentary, or sly remarks. I am white, so my foreignness is very much connected to my accent, but also my demeanor, habits, and tastes. I once heard that I might be able to fool someone into thinking I was American by my looks, but all it took was me opening my mouth for that impression to be dispelled. The most marked instance of othering I experience in a recurring basis is going through customs upon my arrival in the United States from being abroad. Lines that sometimes take more than 3 hours without access to bathrooms or food, after more than 24 hours between flights and layovers, can be dehumanizing. Once in front of a customs officer, we are met with suspicion, and so much as reaching for my passport to put it back into my bag has warranted an officer to shout threats at me. There is a choreography that we must abide by under penalty of being tased, arrested, and deported. Deportation is not only an action taken against foreign criminals, it can be a political tool to keep a large portion of the population of the United States under control. During the COLA strikes and protests this year, the UC system threatened international students sympathetic to the cause with expulsion and ensuing deportation. It can also result from errors in documentation, which forces international students to be paranoidly organized and to keep up with American international relations. Travel bans are being issued with more frequency now that we are under an international health crisis. But even before that, students have been discouraged from returning to their countries for fear they wouldn't be able to come back and continue their studies. I won't be able to see my family this school year, and probably not until the pandemic is officially over. Trump and Pence have both mentioned concerns about Brazil and the very real possibility of a travel ban, in which case only American citizens would be able to re-enter the US from that country. I have been working in the AD&A Museum as the internship program coordinator since fall 2019 and was able to observe the initial project, the installation, and the daily operations of Hostile Terrain 94 in the museum. I facilitated intern participation in the exhibition and participated in the artwork by filling toe tags and hanging them onto the wall on a weekly basis. When the Hostile Terrain team explained the project to museum staff, they presented us with examples of toe tags organized in bundles bound by elastic. On top of one such bundles, there was a toe tag for a person with a distinctly Brazilian name. I already knew the exhibition was to be emotionally charged, but I cannot say I was ready for the impact it had on me. These are stories of Latin American people seeking better lives and opportunity who are met with violence and death. Allowing nature to be the executor, as is the case of the prevention through deterrence policy in the Sonora Desert, is no more kind than swinging the axe. From that point on, my main concern was to protect the interns who would be actively facilitating the activities in the exhibition from undue psychological distress. The space of the exhibition has a very heavy atmosphere with plenty of physical proof of the deadly pathways of illegal migration. The project aimed at witnessing, at bringing forth a human rights crisis happening within driving distance from UCSB. I believe that was accomplished as far as the viewers, but the workers who were tasked with facilitating activities had to desensitize themselves from the issues exposed to be able to bear inhabiting the room for prolonged periods of time. Dwelling in death and suffering takes an emotional toll that is hard to be described, but very palpable in that space. In my opinion, there wasn't enough life or hope to offset the devastating scenario that the exhibition puts forth. There needed to be a reparative counterpoint that allows viewers to perceive the cracks in this atrocious armor that is the idea of the US-Mexico border. The voices of those who made it, those who greatly contribute to American culture and history, should echo louder than the inextricability of the American military power. Our legacy should be one of resistance, of willpower, and of life.
Indeed, we should not neglect the empowering qualities that manifest in the experience of immigrants, nor should we forget to recognize the diverse representation of this demographic. So I'd like to welcome our next guest, our very own intern, Sehi.
Hi, I'm a UCSB student involved in the Art, Design, and Architecture Museum internship. I'm also an undocumented person, so being in the Hostile Terrain exhibit was a relevant experience. Before I share my thoughts, I want to preface my identity as an Asian American person, which is a crucial part of my immigration experience because I'm treated as the model minority. This means that more often than not, I'm not a target group facing migrant discrimination slurs, as the largest demographic group that migrates to the States happen to be Latinx and Hispanic people. I'm privileged in this sense, as I'm treated differently from other undocumented people because of my ethnicity, and I recognize that. So, my thoughts on the exhibit are just my thoughts and experiences, and definitely is not representative for other undocumented people. I was born in Korea and moved to the States at the age of 2. My parents didn't reveal to me that I was undocumented until I needed to apply for DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, at the age of 15. When I was born, the world market had crashed in 1997, and my parents were looking for better opportunities to raise me. I found out that I crossed the border in Canada and came through Seattle. I have no memory of the actual migration process because I was so young, so this exhibit was eye-opening to me. It shows me how, one, I was very lucky to have migrated via flight instead of trekking across the desert, and two, migration laws have changed drastically over time. The fear and strictness of the laws especially heightened in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected into office. I felt the exhibit was somewhat successful in bringing attention to these different migration experiences and humanizing migrants and not criminalizing them like the media often does. But in some ways, I felt this exhibition felt cold and rigid, especially since a part of the exhibit is interactive, as it encouraged participants to fill out toe tags to place on the huge central map to visually see the sacrifices people took and death they risked to migrate. I felt that the exhibit should have felt warmer, more welcoming. Perhaps making the environment feel warmer and more welcoming would have encouraged more people to interact and participate with hostile terrain. Honestly, I don't know how it could have felt warmer, but I certainly felt even borderline uncomfortable in the room. Or maybe that was the purpose. At the end of the day, I feel that this exhibition is relevant not only to me as an undocumented person, but also to our UCSB community, as so many people have come across migrants themselves. This is the perfect time to converse the topic of migration, but it's also a challenging time to talk about it. The 2020 election is coming up, and the possibility of Trump being reelected into office and continuing to demonize migrants can be very real. But as we are also dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, I hope that the world will be more empathetic towards all migrants, whether they are permanent residents, refugees, international students, or undocumented people. I mean, people are vlogging on YouTube about how they traveled across the country to protect their family from staying in a populated, concentrated area during the pandemic. So how is migration from state to state different from country to country, you know? These people were looking for better living conditions, just as many migrants hope for when they also move. I feel that compassion at this time is very important, and hope that the viewers of Hostile Terrain can gain the same insight I did when viewing this particular exhibition and project.
There are many intersections to consider regarding U.S. migration, and letting someone who has endured the immigration process reflect on their experience can help educate others on the surreality of being undocumented, while continuing to recognize the presence of internal disparities across race and class. Now I'd like to hand it off to our final speaker.
As an immigrant, coming from an immigrant family as well, sometimes we do not feel protected. We come to seek for help, to seek for justice, and for a better future. In some of our countries, these places are not safe for us, and they're very limited. Coming from an immigrant family, my family always taught me to respect the law, to be careful, to do my best, to respect others around us, and to always set a good example. Sometimes we have to hide, lie about where we're coming from, how we protect ourselves from others, and being afraid to be deported. However, some of us, we really look for a better future. We want support, and we want to feel safe. In so many communities, there's racism. And looking at these things, it makes me think that my family and I got very lucky to being able to be in this country that we call it home. There are people, children, older people who die trying to seek a better dream, better hope for them. Some of them die or they get killed. And that's something that breaks my heart, knowing that some people cannot enjoy the things that my family and I are able to enjoy. Not 100%, but at least somehow. It is incredible crazy to know that there's a lot of hate towards people like us. But in reality, not all of us are really that scary. There has been a lot of gunshots, children being killed at schools, and none of them have ever been undocumented people. And it's crazy that we get blamed. But I truly believe that the hope still exists for us, and that I am willing to help people in the future so they can find their hope and their strength, and showing that they're not alone.
As we can see from these student testimonies, migration is a complicated and eye-opening topic. In a world full of uncertainty, community support is a powerful asset in bringing us together and providing diverse social awareness. We hope the UCSB community continues to act as an ally to students and immigrants alike, and that these personal statements help our guests to better understand American migration. Though these times may feel dark and lonely, we'd like to share the amazing resources at UCSB, such as the Undocumented Student Services and the Financial Crisis Team. Resources also include philanthropic organizations such as the Legal Aid at Work, the Latino Community Foundation, and the grantmakers concerned with immigrants and refugees who aim to help and elevate migrant communities socially and financially during COVID-19. We want to thank the students, student groups, university organizations, the Hostile Terrain team, the AD&A Museum staff, and Leticia Cobra Lima, the Museum Internship Coordinator, for making this podcast possible. We would also like to thank the entire UCSB community for being change makers. As we come to a close, we'd like to leave our listeners with this quote from a poem by Emma Lazarus, which graces an emblem of American liberty, calling out, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Thank you for listening. Stay well and take care of each other.